The day I got my Sony FX3, I got this. This is the Sony 24mm F1.4 G Master Prime lens. This was the most amount of money I've ever spent on camera gear in a single day. It was brutal. I've now used this lens for handheld run and gun work, short films, YouTube videos, and studio applications, and it's been a great lens. Whether you're hosting a YouTube video much like this, or out in the field or require a wide angle lens for photography, it's a great choice with minimal trade-offs. This video will cover the pros and cons of this excellent full frame lens for the Sony E Mount with my hands-on experience over the last 2 years of shooting, primarily with the Sony FX3 and Sony A7S III. Now, I'm a video shooter primarily and a photographer second, so this video will focus on mostly how it performs for video applications for folks shooting handheld, in the studio, or out in the field. First up, let's talk about why I got this 24mm G Master lens. The short answer is I wanted a premium end result. This is one of the few lenses I'd seen sample video footage from, and I was pumped by the fact it was a wide angle lens that still offered excellent subject separation, and it also had killer autofocus. Now, I needed a camera and lens combination I could give off to my girlfriend Rhiannon, and she had less experience behind the camera than me, so I wanted something that could do all the eye tracking and autofocus automatically while still giving premium image quality results. I knew at the time I'd be shooting in hot, humid, and challenging weather conditions coming up, so I wanted a lens that would be dust and splash proof to match the body of the Sony FX3. I had no issues with this combination running and gunning in Florida for a full month both indoors and out. It was a pleasure to use on the most part. Now, it's all good and well to go buy an expensive camera, but it's only as good as the lens that you're attaching it to. For example, I could pair this lens with a far less expensive camera body and get almost identical results. I was also looking for a wide angle lens that wasn't too wide, and the 24mm field of view was the perfect option. Now, if the 20mm f1.8 was available at the same time of purchasing, I may have considered that as an option, but anything wider looks a little bit too distorted to my taste, so 24mm was the safe bet. The build quality on this lens is excellent, as you would expect from a Sony G Master lens. Having a dedicated aperture ring is great. It also allows you to either have it set to clickless video mode or in clicked mode if you're taking photos. The aperture ring also features an automatic option if you prefer to control the aperture via the dials on the camera. The focus ring is also excellent. This is one of my favorite lenses to control focus manually when doing product shots or slow motion B-roll. While this is a focus by wire system, the focus is quite easy to pull repeatably and reliably. Let's talk about everything we get in the box. So this lens comes with everything you need to get going. We get a really high quality bag included as well, which is a great upgrade over some of the less expensive Sony lenses. Now, we get a rear lens cap. We also get this front lens cap here, which just clips onto the front, and this really weird hood, which has this sort of velvety foam material on the inside, which is great at picking up dust and lint. So if you're wondering why that's there, that's a really good question. You can let me know in the comment section why Sony have put that material on the inside of their lens hood. But overall, you get everything you need to get going, and I have no complaints. If you plan on using this 24mm GM lens with an ND filter, the filter thread size on the front is 67mm. On the side of the Sony G Master lens, we get this custom button, which allows you to map a camera feature to it. Now, I usually map this to something like the autofocus zone mode or something like face eye priority on and off. You can map this to whatever you like, which is a great feature to have. Below the custom function button, we also get an autofocus manual focus switch. So if you're shooting in autofocus and you need to lock it off manually, you can do that without having to dive through the menus. Let's talk about image quality. So overall, the image quality out of this lens when you pair it with the Sony FX3 is excellent. The f1.4 Aperture gives you that soft background and creamy bokeh that a lot of people are looking for. Now, whether you're shooting full frame or APS-C, you can get really great results. When I use this lens on my Sony FX30, the focal length becomes around 36mm or so, making it perfect for studio work much like this. I'm currently shooting on the Sony 35mm f1.8 Prime lens, and this almost gives me the exact same look. The shallow depth of field is slightly different, coming in around the full frame equivalent of an f2.1. But you can get great results on any APS-C Sony camera running a G Master lens. Again, the G Master lens will make the world of difference. This lens features an 11 blade aperture, which also contributes to that wonderfully soft background effect. Now, as you can see from this example shot with the 24mm G Master, it gives you an almost 3D pop separation from the background while also tracking me perfectly moving towards the camera. This was exactly what I was hoping for going for this lens. Now, while it's not super cheap, if you want the best results, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of extra cash. All right, let's talk about low light performance, because everybody wants to shoot in low light. Now, as you probably can expect, shooting with a Sony FX3 or A7S III with most lenses will give you excellent results, but you pair this sensor with this super fast prime lens and you're going to get really beautiful images. Even in low light, the autofocus still performs beautifully. Here's an example of the low light performance pairing this 24mm G Master with the Sony FX3 or A7S III. The FX3 and this 24mm lens has been great to work with. The autofocus, on the most part, has been very good, but it's not perfect. I did notice a few times though where the focus would lose me. This was usually when I would turn my head in the frame, or if there was something in the background like a poster with a face on it or whatever, it would then start tracking the wrong face. That said, for general talk to camera pieces like this, the autofocus is going to work awesome. Another autofocus feature I really like and how it looks with this lens is the tap to focus option by using the selfie screen. This is still unmatched on other camera systems. While others can track you better further back in the frame, Sony really excels when it comes to touch to focus. So I could focus on something close and beyond just by tapping on the screen, and the focus pull is beautiful. Being that I shoot and review lots of different products, being able to use this feature is something that I really appreciate, and odds are you've seen it in this particular video. Furthermore, the minimum focusing distance is listed at 24 centimeters or 0.79 feet, which allows you to really get in close to your subject. Again, great for product shots or showcasing something right in front of your face. The autofocus mixed with the minimum focusing distance makes this a great lens for unboxing channels or in any situation where you really need to get in close. While this lens is great, it's not perfect, so let's talk about some trade-offs. First up, there's no optical image stabilization, so unless you've got some of the latest Sony cameras with the digital active steady shot, you're going to either need a gimbal or to run some of that footage through Catalyst Browse for best results. Most of this overseas footage was stabilized in post, and I was pretty happy with the results. This also means though that you need to shoot with a faster shutter speed and adjust your camera settings ahead of time if you plan on using Catalyst Browse in your workflow. For those who are shooting handheld without a lot of movement, for example, the results will look great and it won't be a huge deal. This all comes down to the experience of the person behind the camera. If you've been shooting handheld for years and you have a really great technique, you'll get great results even without Catalyst Browse. But if you're new to filmmaking, we're going to be doing a lot of run and gun stuff where the active steady shot just isn't as good as other options, and you don't have that digital image stabilization found in the new cameras, you may still need to use Catalyst Browse, but overall, the results out of this are fine. Secondly, depending on what kind of camera body you're using, you might find this a little bit too heavy for straight up handheld run and gun work, but you might not. It really comes down to your style of shooting. Most of the examples you've seen were from 2 to 3 hour shoots, and after a while using this lens with the Sony FX3, it did get a little bit on the sore hand side. So just keep that in mind. If traveling, light is of the utmost importance, go for something smaller. Thirdly, the focus breathing isn't the worst, but it's not great. If you own a modern Sony camera that supports focus breathing compensation, then turn it on and it won't be as much of an issue. While you do lose part of the frame with focus breathing enabled, I'd rather leave that on than off. Now for Sony A7S III owners who got the shaft from Sony's pathetic firmware upgrade support, you'll be living with the focus breathing on that camera. That said, the focus breathing on the 24mm G Master is way better than the 35mm G Master, and you can make your own call on whether or not this is an issue for you or not. I personally find focus breathing very distracting, but it's nowhere near as bad as Sony shafting the A7S III owners. Hashtag update Sony A7S III. Jokes aside, this is a really great lens. There's little in the way of noticeable chromatic aberration when you're shooting in the real world. Lens flaring is minimal, and it's quite easy to achieve that nice sunstar effect by stopping down to f8. If you're a Sony shooter looking for a great 24mm f1.4 fast prime lens for full frame, this is a great lens. I'm pretty sure there's smaller options available for APS-C shooters, but I also really love how this looks on my Sony FX30. Check out the links in the description box below if you want to check this out. My name's Shane, thanks for watching, catch you next time, see ya.